A Tennessee theme tonight. Joining us live on the phone is Senator Lamar Alexander, Republican of Tennessee. He's also the chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. Senator, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Steve, for having me. I enjoyed hearing Bill Frist.
Well, let me begin with a piece that you wrote for the Washington Post. This is the headline: "We need more COVID-19 testing." You're proposing a Shark Tank to get us there. So if you could elaborate.
Well, to put it simply, we need tens of millions of basically screening tests that are as simple as a pregnancy test that you can get at a drugstore and take home and administer yourself. Because as we come up on August especially, and we have 50 million kids wanting to go back to school, 20 million back to college, as we're going back to work, we're going to need to test a lot of people in order to build confidence to come out of the home and go back to school and back to work. We don't have that test today. We have good tests. In fact, we're testing more than we have for almost any other kind of disease like this. Let me not say it that way. Let me compare it to HIV, where we do 3 million tests a year. We've already done 3.5 million of COVID-19, but we need a simpler screening test. And the Shark Tank at the National Institutes of Health will have about 24 of these early stage concepts swimming around, and we'll put them in competition and try to get them on the market, producing millions of tests a day by August. A test like one that you might use a foam swab, take a photograph of it with your iPhone. It would light up if it registered positive, and it would send that information to a central health authority. If it was positive, then you might go in and have a more sophisticated test, see a doctor. But if you're testing everybody in a nursing home, everybody in a school class, everybody in a factory once a month to build up confidence to go back to work, we're going to need tens of millions of these, and we don't have them today.
You mentioned August. For you personally, would you feel comfortable attending the Republican National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina?
Well, I don't even know if we'll have a Republican National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. We'll have to see. I think all of this depends on what happens each week, and I think Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx tell us every day it all depends on data. It's hard to predict. You know, if we do what's recommended, if we stay away from each other, stay in our homes as long as we can, and then if we have enough tests to identify the 4, 5, or 6% of us that have this disease, we can then quarantine them and the people they might have exposed, and the rest of us don't have to be quarantined. So we need the tests, the screening tests, lots of them, in order to have any chance of going to a Republican National Convention or any other big event.
And Senator, I know this is personal for you. How is your daughter doing? She contracted COVID about a month ago.
Well, she did. She and her husband both did. They're in Westchester County, which is a hot spot in New York. They're fine, but they were sick, and they're in their 40s. So they're a couple of healthy 40-year-olds with 3 young kids, and they went through a very tough 2 weeks. Now she's thinking about, they've had the antibody test. There are 2 kinds of tests. The first is whether you have it, which she did, and the second is the test to see whether you have had it, and you might have developed antibodies that probably almost certainly create an immunity for a period of time. And they're experimenting with donating blood from people like my daughter who have antibodies and using that as a treatment for someone who's sick with the disease. So she's volunteered to do that and hopes she can do it.
Does she have any theory in how she contracted coronavirus?
She thinks she got it from her husband, and he thinks he got it by just going out and taking an Uber down to a shop there in Westchester County. They don't know for sure, but it was all over the place, and they were being pretty careful, but apparently not careful enough. Dr. Birx says it's the most contagious virus she's ever dealt with, which is why I think we all have to be careful with it.
How are you dealing with this new normal? You're used to being back and forth in Washington. You're home in Knoxville, Tennessee tonight. For you and your wife, how are you dealing with all of this?
Well, we're getting to know each other real well. we live outside Maryville, Tennessee, right at the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains, and she built me an office to get my piano and computer and telephone out of the house some years ago, and it's come in pretty handy. So I'm out here in this log building that was once a stable, looking out the window. Tonight I can't see anything because it's dark, but I can hear the whippoorwills, and I spend most of the day on the telephone talking with nursing home owners and cabinet members and the owner of the local kennel who applied for a payroll protection loan because nobody's traveling anymore and no one's leaving their pets with him.
What will the next 6 months look like, though, in terms of the Senate? As the chair of the Help Committee, as you deal with what may be another multi-trillion-dollar bailout plan, will we see that? What's the sense among Senate Republicans, your colleagues?
Well, I've talked to a lot of them. You know, we're, oddly enough, I suspect the others are, we're as busy or busier at home than we were when we were in Washington. And like everybody else, we don't know exactly what the future will be. This has turned everything upside down. And we were all ready, for example, 6 weeks ago to bring to the floor a bill to take care of all the deferred maintenance in the national parks, or half of it anyway, and to do the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We had a number of things, lower health care costs, making it easier to go to college, and boom, this blew it up. So I think we'll go back in May in the United States Senate. I think the first thing we need to do is look at this enormous amount of money that we've spent and see if it's working or where it's not working. But what really is important, and the most important $1 billion that was appropriated this week, is not for all of the programs that help people. It's for that shark tank of the National Institutes of Health to see if we can, within a few weeks or at least by the end of the summer, begin to produce millions of tests, screening tests a day, so people can know whether they have the disease. That way we can isolate them, the people they contact, quarantine those people, and the rest of us will feel more comfortable going back to work, back to school, out to eat.
And to that point, that Shark Tank approach, how confident are you that we will get there?
Well, we don't know. I mean, they could all fail. We're talking about early stage concepts. They're not proven. They're just new ideas, a new way of doing tests. But if only one of them succeeds or two of them succeeds, that's really all we need. So I'm very hopeful about it. Of course, we have heading the National Institutes of Health, one of the most distinguished scientists in America, Dr. Francis Collins, who once headed the Human Genome Project. We forget that we have a lot of very talented people. You see Dr. Fauci, you see Dr. Birx on television, you see a number of others. Dr. Fauci works for Francis Collins, this distinguished scientist, so he's going to be heading that up, and I have a lot of confidence in him to identify these early stage concepts and see if we can find one that will produce enough of those tests. I think when that happens, people will begin to relax and we'll begin to see our way out of this.
And one final question, because you're talking to the Senate leadership. What will the Senate floor look like? And as the chair of the Help Committee, your own committee hearings as we move into spring and summer?
Well, when we have hearings, I suppose we could have a virtual hearing, but those would be awkward. I think we'll simply spread out around the hearing room. And I think when we vote on the Senate floor, that we'll do it over a longer period of time. You know, in the Senate, you have to vote in person. They call your name and you say yay or nay. But you can spread that out over 30 or 40 minutes, and people can come and go. And I think we'll all, whatever we do, I think we ought to stay at least 6 feet away from each other, both for our own safety and that of the other senators, but mainly to set a good example. I mean, because even as we go back to work, and we all hope we can as rapidly as it's safe, we're going to have to continue to follow these hygiene and smart safety procedures while we identify the people who are sick. We're not going to be out of this until we have a treatment, which will be a few months away, and we're not going to be really out of it until we have a vaccine, and we've never gotten a vaccine in less than a year.
Senator Lamar Alexander, we wish the best to your daughter, your son-in-law, your grandchildren, and to your wife. Thank you very much for spending some time with us on C-SPAN. We always appreciate it.
And we wish you the best, Steve. Stay healthy.
Thank you. Senator Lamar Alexander joining us from his home in Maryville, Tennessee.